Part. It's like a book club with your best friend, but make it a podcast. Welcome back, crawlers, to another episode of Part. I'm Nikki, your bookish bestie, and today we are going to continue our crawl through book number 7 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, This Inevitable Ruin by Matt Dinniman. Today's episode will focus in on chapters 12 through 28. I really wanted to stop at the end of part 1, but alas, there was just too much happening. I could not stop reading. And like I said in last week's episode, I am truly just reading to enjoy this book when I feel like I've reached a good enough point to have enough content to make an episode. I'm just going to stop and report back to all of you. I have also covered the first 6 books in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, so if you're interested in checking out any of those episodes, I will go ahead and link them down in the description below. And remember, you are reading along with me. I have not read ahead in this series, so all of my thoughts, theories, reactions are truly just based on the first 6 books in the series and the first 28 chapters of book 7. Which means there will be spoilers for the entire series up to the 28th chapter of the 7th book. And friendly reminder, these are some very adult books with some very adult scenes. I will do my best to keep it PG-13 for little ears, but please, please be mindful of your audience at home. And now it is time for the Guild Report. This is a segment at the top of every episode where I get to revisit the comments that you left on the previous week's video. I pick 2 to 3 and I talk about them in detail. As to why I pick the comments that I pick, honestly, I don't know. It just stood out to me for one reason or another. It could be about anything. It could be highlighting a fun theory, answering a question I had. The most important thing, though, is that it's where you all get to be part of this podcast. And I am just so grateful that every Tuesday I get to not only post a video, but I get to read comments and feel like I'm part of a community and get to share the love of Dungeon Crawler Carl with all of you. Now, the first commenter, I have to say this comment impacted me so much, but I want to read it first and then we will chat about it. And they said, I'm probably oversharing for a random guy on the internet, but I feel the need to share this story. I'm retired Army. My last 15 years, I was in medevac, multiple deployments to interesting places. We mostly worked in teams of about 20 people in forward bases, formed really close bonds with my guys. The nature of that job, you see some really interesting things. I don't want to call it trauma bonding because it was deeper than that, but bonding through intense situations, trying to keep it PG-13 for your readers as well. I appreciate that. Anyway, I've been retired for about 10 years now. Today, I randomly ran into an old Army buddy at the gym. The hug he gave me felt like just how Carl felt, hugging his fellow cookbook authors. We both teared up a little and talked for an hour. I'm sure it looked strange to all the folks around us, but damn, it felt good. We're both a little broken from our experiences, but for that hour, it felt like I wasn't alone. When you go through some of the stuff that we've been through, normal people can't really understand. It was a nice moment. And then when I got home, I see your post about tearing up at Carl's reunion, and it just felt a little serendipitous. As always, great episode. These books are full of real emotion. First, I just want to thank you so much for not only willing to be vulnerable, but just sharing your story. And I really wanted to share your comment for 2 reasons. One, if it helped even one other person feel seen or connected, it was just important to share it. But 2, I just felt like there's these moments in life where to an outsider, they might not seem very significant. Like, for example, I know I'm not changing the world by yapping about books, but for some reason, like your comment held so much weight to the point where I was thinking about it so much over this past week. And like, I want to reemphasize, I wasn't thinking about it because it like negatively impacted me, but more, I think it just like exposed how profound these books are and how deeply, not only they've impacted me, but like everyone who's read them. It has shaped the way, I don't know, maybe I don't want to speak for other people, but at least for me, it has shaped the way that I perceive literature and experience like connection with books. I am an avid and a voracious reader. I have read a lot of books. I've never had books that have like made me feel so seen. And then someone who has completely different life experiences, we can both read the same book and we can empathize with these characters and we can experience connection. And it's not about having to have had experienced the same things to see each other. And I just find that so profound. And I feel like so incredibly lucky that I also get to be part of this community and get to talk with all of you each week. So without getting too wordy, I fear I already have done so. Just thank you. Thank you for sharing this. And thank you to anyone who week to week shares either their experiences or their insight or their feedback for this series. Like, I know I feel like I'm like engagement farming when I say this, but I truly am not. I just love reading your feedback and your comments, and that connection piece I feel like holds so much value. So even if just one other person reads your comment and sees themselves in the words that you share, I just find that so, so powerful. Moving on to comment number 2. This commenter said, I love Sir Rendlegore. I feel like Carl getting Rend as his pet is such an important moment. Carl entered the dungeon with Donut as his pet, but now they both have pets of their own. They're equals, co-warlords who will lead everyone into battle, and the two of the most powerful crawlers. The addition of Rend feels like the final piece of their found family and tradition into their new dynamic. I love Rend. We know this. He was my favorite character last week, but I think I undervalued the addition of Rend. Like, yes, I thought he was cute and a little bit maniacal, but there's actually like this, your comment made me realize like the symbolism and the weight of the addition of Rend. I think it's like a very symbolic, like moving of Donut's position from pet to co-warlord, like partner. Like, yeah, she was already there, but I just feel like their found family is growing completely. And usually, like Donut mentioned last week, I don't like the late series editions, especially when it comes to like, a found family, but I love Rend. And actually, you know what, speaking of family, I think this bleeds perfectly into our book discussion for today. As I mentioned before, today I'm going to be chatting about chapters 12 through 28. I intended to stop at the end of part 1, but I couldn't. I could not peel myself away from my Kindle this week. I had to know what happened. I'm stressed. And you have to know, as soon as I finish recording this episode tonight, I am diving straight back into these chapters, because where we leave off in chapter 28, Carl just finished fighting on the southern front and he's moving towards the northern front. And I'm stressed. But let's rewind it back to the beginning of these chapters. I think it was around chapter 12 or 13. Where the AI had increased the map size, and there's all these like random mobs kind of rolling around. And in order to have their alert system work properly, they have to eliminate all the new kind of, newer recycled mobs that are roaming their area. And don't get me wrong. Well, the Skank Skunk Warrior mob thing was quite funny. I don't think that was my biggest takeaway. There was this moment where Carl's like walking with some of the mercenaries from his faction, and he notices this. He says, I was starting to come to the uncomfortable realization this was pretty normal for the people of the syndicate, that the general citizenry of the galaxy as a whole were all similar to us in so many ways. Despite their vastly different anatomies and cultures and environments, I didn't know what that meant, but the knowledge made me feel strangely unsettled. It was the same feeling I had during the Iron Tangle, when I just knew I was missing something important. Okay, one, is this foreshadowing that there is actually going to be some deep, meaningful connection that transcends everything, binds everything? Like, does this go back to like the primal engines within each planet? And I know it's been alluded to before that like the mantids, was it the mantids? I'm actually not 100% sure about that, but essentially these, primal engines aren't actually as well understood as we think they are. And like, just like this connected piece, I don't know, like this little mention made me spiral so much, because anytime Carl feels like something is amiss or that he's not getting the full picture, I feel like that's a plot device to tell us that yes, there is something that's missing, and Matt is starting to get our wheels turning to figure it out. But actually, you know what, let's get back to faction wars, because I could dive down like the rabbit holes all day long. We know the ceasefire actually ended prematurely because of the lem extortion interfered when Carl and Katya went under for their separate but also somehow linked treatments. So Carl, as I mentioned in my last episode, had his mind balance activated, and I was trying to guess like what was possibly causing this. And we find out that it was indeed the Bedlam Bride wreaking havoc. So there was this moment where Carl was almost assassinated by the ogre, and thank you to Baroness Victory for saving Carl. She is like such a G. Like, I don't even know. I feel like they kind of lucked out with her, and Quasar has yet to steer them wrong. But anyway, getting back to Carl and the Bedlam Bride situation, he ends up going back to like the FUPA flag room, I think it was. And the notifications all work differently there. And he starts like kind of clearing everything because he has to reset it and kind of re-put his filters on. And he starts noticing that his mind balance is being continually activated and leveling up, and that spells are kind of trying to be cast, but then they're kind of being suppressed. And Carl is like, oh my gosh, like I guess he's starting to realize like how dangerous having Shia Maria on his chest has become. Also, that toe ring, I feel like has become such a, I guess just more evidence that the AI is always trying to help Carl. In maybe it's just the crawlers in general, and that the AI is almost anticipating things that Carl's going to need before Carl can even realize how much he actually needed that item. And it's also making me starting to wonder, like, does the AI think that Carl needs this mind balance for reasons beyond the Bedlam Bride? I have continually wondered how his primal race is going to impact him. And so I can only wonder if the mind balance skill is just needed for something else. But before we dive too far into the Bedlam Bride, I think we need to talk about Katya and her story, because it's just so dark and so sad. I mean, Matt really made you feel like you were in like a dreamlike state when Carl was moving through his experience, but also somehow got linked with Katya as well. And he saw glimpses of her story. And there was like a cancer diagnosis and, you know, this little girl that she didn't have access to anymore. And then Fanar like telling on her for having this, I guess, just addiction that was like really old. And Carl made note that while it's like might just feel like another day in the dungeon, like to her it was just like shattering, like world ending for her, and for her to have to like live these moments. And you know, Katya in the beginning of this said I think she said my worst and best day was the same day. And I can't help but wonder, like, what was the best part about that? Was it just like getting to be with that little girl? And just seeing like how important that like relationship was to her. Even though that day was so devastating. And I also started to spiral in another direction. Like, we know there's that looming threat of like the Blood Sultanate and needing to erase them and the Crown of the Sepsis Horror. Like, I just, in my bones, feel like Katya is going to have to use this orchid. And I just feel like it's going to be the pregnancy, like, reward or boon or whatever you want to call it. Not because I feel like that's what she needs or wants, but like because I feel like this dungeon is just programmed to like maximize viewership. And to me, I feel like any chance it has to be cruel and kind of just prey on your vulnerabilities, it's going to do so. And while it might make for like a good character arc, it just feels so sinister and twisted to me. And I know it hasn't even happened yet, but there's just like certain moments in the story where like I can kind of see where it's headed. But then again, Matt always throws a curveball, and maybe things do happen, but like not in the way I was expecting. So I'm hoping it's one of those instances where I'm wrong. Let's get back to Carl and Katya's weird inception experience with the Bedlam Bride. I mean, we know that the Bedlam Bride, I guess, is restrained thanks to her husband that like randomly popped up in this weird dreamlike state. And I guess my question is, we know that the Bedlam Bride is with Katya's like dream baby, I guess. Here's where I'm struggling a little bit. Like, the Bedlam Bride is very much real. And she's trapped in like this area within Carl. Like, does that make the baby any less real in like this weird dreamlike state? Is the Bedlam Bride's husband real? Is it all just kind of like within Carl's mind, like this fabricated situation where they're able to trap her inside that? Like, how is she actually restrained? And I think the mechanics of all this is a little bit confusing to me. But as we know, the Lemexorcian summoned Carl because they had insider information the minute he started like this therapy to, you know, it's all a little bit confusing to me, but essentially to restrain the Bedlam Bride and keep her from taking over his body. And they were able to do that using the warlord chat. And when they summoned him, he kind of went incorporeal for a second because he was, I guess, like incapacitated. And so he existed in both places. So they were in the hospital on their base, and then he was also the limb extortion. So this is where things get a little hairy for me, a little bit confusing, and maybe even a little bit confusing for Carl. For some reason, the Bedlam Bride gets unleashed, and it completely backfires on the limb extortion because she's not like a traditional demon. She's also like a demigod. And so she just gets unleashed, completely like decimates their entire base. So then like all of the adjutants start showing up, and they're like witnessing this thing happening. And then the head of like the limb extortion just starts like going, I guess, crazy from the Bedlam Bride, like delayed, but still goes crazy and just, kills himself. And I guess this is like a good news, bad news situation. Like good news is, I guess the Bedlam Bride is restrained within Carl, but he's able to access her and unleash her whenever he sees fit. So Carl is just adding to his tools of ultimate destruction within his person. And I can't help but wonder, like, how much pressure can this dude take? Because we are told time and time again from other crawlers that like you're looking more crazed by the day, more unhinged. And, and I continually wondered how the Bedlam Bride was going to show up on this level. And, I had a few people comment like, she will, but not in the way you expect. And I'm starting to wonder, like, is Carl going to use her later on in Faction Wars? Will he unleash her? Will she willingly be re-restrained? Or is it kind of like a Carl's doomsday scenario where once it's unleashed, there is no going back? Like, that is the final choice that Carl will make. Like, what would be the consequences of that? I don't know. I'm like, there are so many moving pieces in these chapters. I wouldn't say I'm having a hard time keeping up, but I feel like there is an infinite number of things to which I can spiral about. And I have to be particular because I only have so much time in a day. Even though Ferdinand appears to be like a whiny little brat, he is actually kind of like him. I should say that too. But he proposes an emergency action item and essentially creates like a blackout because he tells the AI, like, essentially, like, I think the limb extortion is cheating and no one should have access to any of the feeds and we should just do a complete blackout. And the AI accepts it. So effective immediately, everyone within the dungeon is subjected to an immediate live feed blackout. So I do think, like, obviously the Dungeon Crawler World show will go on as it normally does, but having access to each individual crawler's 24/7 feed, I think that's going to be restricted. We also get, a series of other like system messages after like everything happens with the limb extortion. So the democratic extortion has been defeated. As this defeat was voluntary, the closest allied castle warlord to the headquarters will receive all their assets. And then we find out that the limb extortion had been awarded to the madness. There was also a pause. And then we get, due to ceasefire rule 3, subsection 6 of the ceasefire addendum, the voluntary withdrawal of our combatant squad has engaged acceleration scenario 2. The ceasefire will be shortened by 23.33 hours. And then we get, the ceasefire has ended. And now do you see why I couldn't just like stop reading? This got crazy. And then we find out that you can start moving into each other's territories using the designated corridors, but you can't use offensive magic. And so that's something that's actually very important because a lot of the crawlers have been, relying heavily on the fact that they can use magic. And so there is going to be a lot of brute force just coming at them in the ramp up phase. And then we also find out like this is the phase that is truly designed to just create like insane amount of carnage and bloodshed. And then obviously Architect Houston just goes to attack Carl, ends up like shooting him, but then he's transported out. And then, oh my gosh, just chaos ensues. Chaos. It's just chaos. And like I said, it's not that I'm having a hard time like enjoying and reading the story. It's just there are so many moving pieces. And I I do think moving forward, I'm going to have to take like breaths and just kind of like let things sit so I can process them, because I don't even know if I've captured everything I wanted to capture just in these chapters alone, but alas, we must keep going. We are now in the ramp up phase. They can only move between like this kilometer gap at like the northern and southern fronts. And we do also know that the scouts can move freely. There is no magic that can be used. And this form of trench warfare, at least so far, has been chaotic. Like so much has happened. And as always, I'm not going to touch on everything. It's just impossible for me to do so. But I am going to cover the highlights and the things that stood out to me the most. So number one, the whole dumpling pet thing was just so messed up. And I do think because like the dumpling is actually very, in my mind, similar to like a meatball. So like rend. And it's just it just like kind of shows how like sadistic the Reavers are to take these pets, make them love you, gain their loyalty, and then just make them go crazy and then unleash them on crawlers as if you have no regard for them at all. It just feels so sinister and so sad. And to me, that was the first instance where I was like, this is messed up. I mean, no, okay, what am I talking about? No, it's not the first instance. There's a lot of messed up things in this series. But I think it just showed the lengths in faction wars in which the other factions were willing to go to take out the crawlers. I mean, all bets are off. And then kind of jumping back before we get into my list, there was this moment with the Lemming Sortion where he was just so outraged. Like, how could you do this to us? And Carl is just kind of sitting there like, read the room. Like, you've been doing this to us. Like, to act so just like offended and just like deeply scared, as if like these crawlers haven't been feeling that this entire time, was like, I feel like not only for Carl, but for me, like this out of body experience. But like, let's jump back into my list. I think Colonel Boomer is just like a complete badass. I mean, I've been also, okay, this might be embarrassing to admit, but I've also been referring to people that minorly inconvenience me as like a cheese stick now. Like if someone cuts me off in traffic, like I'm like, you cheese stick. I think it's going to become a permanent part of my vocabulary. That and like mama needs a night off. I use that very often. I mean, there's a lot of dungeon crawler Carlisms that have been now firmly implemented into my vocabulary. As I mentioned, like this form of trench warfare was so chaotic. And then there was that moment where like Carl is just like, we need to go on the offensive essentially, because they're expecting us to try to just like hold the fronts until we're able to use our magic, and we need to take them by surprise. So of course they launch all like those alarm traps and the lights, and they just kind of blind the other side, and then they take the invisibility scrolls and then they just go for it. And it was messy. It did not go as smooth, I think, as they would have hoped. But they made it. And then there's also like that element of like he's holding on to like the daughter's kiss and he's just in so much pain. And then he gets alerted that there's going to be this debuff because he just like waited too long. And then he passes out. So he uses it and then passes out. And obviously this like daughter's kiss is just getting insanely powerful. And it was not necessarily the safest thing to use within a trench, but you know what? Whatever. We made it through. There's also like what the NPC like Porsec like bartender used with like the water scrolls was just so insidious. So essentially they filled the trench with water, and they were able to like alter the contents of water within a container. The trench is the container, and they made into like this acid essentially. And then they used like an illusion spell to cover it up. So like people are just like flying into this trench of like boiling, I think it's acid. It just crazy. And I will say this was, I think when they were on their way to kill Princess Donatia, where Baroness Victory is kind of looking at Carl like, yeah, you're smart, but like, holy like crap, essentially. Like, what is even happening? Like, I think she's almost a little bit scared of him. And I could be wrong. I don't know if she's necessarily an easily shaken lady, but I do think there's this moment where she is kind of like, okay, like we're doing this, like, oh my gosh. But I've said this before and I'll say it again. Anytime that Carl can kind of manipulate the rules of the dungeon for his favor, like, I am all here for it. I'm here for it. So after the bombing, like, Louis lands the party planner, his aircraft, and Carl notices that Bonnie is like in the gunner seat, and that changeling kid is actually like masking as an adult, but they're both like on board this like war vessel, and Carl's just like, this is so screwed up. And it, it actually reminds me of like that haunting quote from Bonnie like earlier in these chapters where she said, I shouldn't have to think about killing outworlders. Why shouldn't I? Have they stopped trying to kill me? This is something that continues to be a theme throughout these books, but this idea that like not even like the NPC children are just protected from like this cruelty and this like sadism, I guess. And it's just so sad. And of course, Carl does not skip a beat. He goes straight to like kill Princess Donatia. And oh my gosh, the scene, I don't know what it was about this particular scene, but it just sent chills up my spine. And I guess if I had to nail it down, like this is like another reminder. And I know this story is a tragedy, and I know these are horror books, but there's certain scenes where I'm like, oh yes, like this is a horror novel, because there was like that moment where like they're searching through Princess Donatia's like base or like castle, and he's going, oh Empress, and I wasn't even listening to it, and immediate just shivers down my spine. And it was like that moment like where Carl saw the edge and he was there and he almost plummeted off of it. And I also found her death is like so, we're meant to like hate these characters, but I just don't think it's so simple. I know she's the enemy. I mean, they all are. They're all like united against Carl, but you couldn't help but get that feeling like we have like some of the NPCs, like the other hunters, that they were there because they had to, because financially they needed to be there to help their people. And I couldn't help but like Princess Donatia was like trying to tell Carl that towards the end. And it doesn't justify the things she did, and it doesn't justify her position within faction wars. But I just felt like maybe she had another reason she needed to be there aside from just wanting fame and notoriety and just being there for fun. And it kind of felt really sad. And we also find out her death is actually quite meaningful and is quite complicated, at least in like the court sense. It can actually has some really strong implications. But then the AI, as it's like telling Carl about this, is also pointing him towards other factions that would be even worse to get rid of because it would cause even more chaos. And then I guess I'm just starting to wonder, like, is the AI on Carl's side, or does the AI, I don't know if it's actually in pain. I think it just enjoys chaos and it enjoys disrupting as much as it can. I think it's important that we remember that it can quickly be turned against the crawlers as well. And then after all of this, Carl like oddly like semi-recruits some null NPC mercenaries, and I just found this like reminiscent of like Dante's experience, like how these NPCs within the dungeon are just reassigned just based on like shifting roles or needs, and like they don't actually want to be there. Like they are just keeping their head down. They're trying to make it through. And there are like these pockets, these moments within the book where we're brought back to that fact. The fact that like all of these mercenaries that Carl's fighting against are probably either former crawlers or people from other worlds that were like indentured to this dungeon. They're just like trying to make it through, man. And now they're like conscripted to work in this or fight in this faction war where the stakes are so high, all the protections are off, and oh gosh, there's just so many layers. I am quickly realizing that some of my favorite chapters are actually the former cookbook author chapters. I don't know if it's just getting some more information about them or some background, but I'm just finding like their stories and their experiences to be just so powerful. Within these chapters, we actually got 2 excerpts. The first one was from Everly, and I just feel like Everly's was just a cautionary tale for not relying on other crawlers and thinking that you can kind of go at it alone. And if that's not a parallel for Carl, I don't know what is. And now I do think Carl is getting better, and he's learned lessons, and he's learned to start connecting with his found family and using their strengths. But I do think there was a time where he had a very similar mentality within the dungeon, that like it was his plan and he was going to see it through and he's going to do everything that he had to do and didn't really expect much from anyone else. And I think Katya and just all the other people within his guild have shown him the importance of using the different skill sets that he has at his disposal. In Everly's chapter, we also get the first mentioning of the inevitable ruin. And Everly says, the inevitable ruin, that's what their queen used to call this moment. The moment you realize there was no hope, nothing left to do, and all that was left was to die and reflect upon what you've already done while you waited. To ruminate on how you've helped the colony and to beg forgiveness of God for not sacrificing enough. What does that mean within context of Carl's story? I mean, we know this book is called This Inevitable Ruin. And sidebar, someone commented on one of my TikToks and said, it's not called like The Inevitable Good Time. And I'm like, yeah, I know you're right. But I just feel like so much dread with this story. And I am filled with like very little hope. I think okay, let me separate this. I do think Carl will be successful. I do think he's going to win Faction Wars. If not, at the very least, travel down to the next floor because I know we have more books we have to read. But I just can't help that there is going to be like that ruinous moment for him where he's looking around and all hope is lost and he's lost a great deal and he isn't sure how to move forward and just kind of accepts his fate. I don't know. I feel like this is some pretty powerful foreshadowing and I'm nervous. The next cookbook author that we get a glimpse into is Milk. And I thought her flashback was going to be a lot more further away. Now we find out that she's basically indentured to be in the dungeon like forever because she's within Club Vanquisher, but she's kind of concealed and she can't leave until her services have been accessed so many times and they've only been accessed about like 6, I think it was. But she has this meeting with Miriam and Prepotente, and we get a little bit more, I guess, information about what happened with Miriam and Prepotente within Club Vanquisher, why they got banned. And we find out it was obviously because Miriam, and I think we might have known this already, was turned into a vampire, and then Prepotente just went crazy. But Milk was the reason they were able to escape Club Vanquisher. She was the one who gave them access to a map. And I think like Prepotente kind of stumbling into that area and with Milk's help, I think it ignited something within Milk. And I am just so hopeful that Carl gets to like have a reunion with Milk. I feel like there's something within Milk that is going to be good for Carl, but I think there's something within Carl that's going to be good for Milk. And I just hope they meet. I really do. And I think her chapter's in here and we've met, I think every alive crawler or alive cookbook author so far that we've gotten a glimpse into. I might be wrong about that. But anyone that hasn't died, I feel like we have met. So I do think Carl is going to meet her and I'm just looking forward to that reunion. My absolute favorite character from these chapters was Jamal. Oh my gosh. How could you not love Jamal? He's just a shark man that wants to jump. He just wants to jump. And I want that for him too. I feel like he has made a pretty great case as to why he needs to jump. And Carl and Katya need to get on that. They need to make that happen for them. Every time he says anything, I am just finding myself just, even right now, look at me. I'm like cracking a smile because like he brings joy to the page. And I think Matt is just such an expert at bringing in like that perfect amount of levity that doesn't make the book feel campy, but it lightens like just how tense and dark and dismal things feel. And so thank you, Matt, for gifting us Jamal because he is the perfect mix of naive, but also like oddly situationally aware. And he is by far one of the characters I am most excited for to see in action during Faction Wars. I mean, once he gets jumpable legs, I have no doubt that he is just going to be an absolute unit. My favorite donut quote from these chapters is actually a favorite donut and Jamal, mostly Jamal quote from these chapters. And it was at that moment where Donut is trying to convince Jamal that he needs to stay behind for their final stand, basically because he's really just not that mobile right now. And Donut says, we need you for the last stand. I'm quite jealous, honestly. I don't think anyone other than you can do it. And Jamal just looks at Donut and he says, Jamal feels as if you're trying to reverse psychologicalize him. It will not work. Jamal is much too quick-witted for such tricks. I was once the most feared warriors of all the seas. And Donut just goes, yeah, well, whatever, I tried. And like, one, I feel like the comedic timing, I know I didn't listen to it, but it was just so on point. But Jamal is like the perfect blend of just being so goofy and so funny, but also like doesn't miss a beat as well. And now it is time for my favorite segment, Behind the Guild Report, and that is honorable mentions. It's the segment where I dump anything and everything that I feel like was important, but honestly, I couldn't fit it neatly into this episode. And coming up at number 1, what is Kiwi's baby gonna look like? I'm just nosy. I want to know, what is this weird little like dinosaur bear baby going to come out as? And as we know, dinosaurs are not mammalians. So my money is on a bear. It's going to look like a bear. Coming up second, I know I did not talk about this in detail. I mentioned the FUPA, the Fortress of Unyielding Power and Authority, but I did not highlight how freaking funny that is. It absolutely sends me that this is the name of their base and the AI will not let them change it. Like, I feel like there are so many Dungeon Crawler Carl t-shirts or posters that I need, and FUPA just like needs to be one of them. The next thing is that we know they're instituting a blood bar for safe rooms, and I had that theory, and I don't know if I've got an answer to it yet, that there are like non-conscripted crawlers or crawlers that are not part of a single faction. And I wonder, like, with the blood bar being instituted, if they're trying to just stay absent, does that mean that they're denied protections or access to their safe rooms? Like, I feel like there's going to be implications with the blood bar being reinstituted. I'm not sure what that looks like yet, but I think it's important. Next, I feel like I would be remiss if I did not mention just Samantha's utter devastation by missing Louis and Juicebox's wedding. I think she felt a little bit better knowing there could potentially be a longer ceremony in the future. Do I think we'll ever get that ceremony? Probably not. But it at least got Samantha to be okay-ish for now. The Gloom Wraith phase just seems absolutely horrifying as an ability. I am excited to see how that will be utilized more during Faction Wars. Some weird little tidbit was dropped from Rosetta that Odette did a story about Mordecai using sleeping potions. Like, okay, like I feel like that was dropped. Carl went under and we didn't get more information about that, but I don't know. Odette's obsession focus with Mordecai has not shifted yet, and I feel like I need more information about that. We know Prepotente is settling a score with the Blood Hunter program that kind of is essentially responsible for what happened to Miriam. But once he's finished with that, he is going to join up with Carl, and I'm actually low-key really excited for that. We know Lucia Marr is just off drinking in Shantytown. I don't know. I used to hold out this hope that we would team up with Lucia Marr because she is such a formidable crawler, but she just seems honestly unhinged, and I don't know what that's going to look like. But I'm still kind of holding out hope that with Faction Wars, she is going to kind of team up with Carl in some way, even though I think she hates Donut. So I don't know how that's going to work, but, you know, I have hope-ish. Moving forward, I feel like that cat food that Carl brought from the Lem Extortion base back with him, I feel like that cat food is going to be more important or is important in some way. I mean, Donut immediately recognize that smell, but I feel like Ferdinand has not fully woken up yet, and I'm wondering if like that cat food is going to be used to like wake him up, and then that's going to like ignite him and Donut's love story, and like, are they gonna get married too? I don't know. He's calling her his fiance. I don't know. And last but honestly, I think most importantly, Carl is now party leader. We know he has the highest base stats. I mean, I don't know how I feel about that. Now, I do think Donut a few floors ago would just be absolutely appalled, but part of me wonders if maybe she, especially after the last floors with having to be deck master and maybe some of the responsibilities that come with being party leader, part of me just wonders if maybe she's a little bit relieved, even though she's pretending that she's kind of enraged by it. I don't know. I feel like this is a very symbolic event. with Carl kind of moving into like the driver's seat for his party. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I just don't know. Some looming questions I have moving forward. Number one, we know that the interface, the Valte interface that Carl got from Polly actually had a few options. And number one, Carl could just do nothing. Forget it even exists. Just like let it hang out there. Number two, he could press the fuse and blow everything up himself and anything associated with the crawl. Just press the fuse and it would all go. Number three, he could relieve himself of the burden and press the button to just like turn it all off, like just disable it all. Now, my question is with number three, what did that actually do? Did that actually free the AI? What are the implications of that? If he did free the AI, what does that even look like? I mean, literally the AI is already unhinged. So I don't know. I'm a little bit nervous about that moving forward. And second, and probably most importantly, will they be able to hold the Northern Front? I don't know. You're going to have to come back next week as we continue our crawl through book number 7 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, This Inevitable Ruin by Matt Dinniman. What did I miss that you'd like me to chat a little bit more about? Let me know down in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to get alerted when there's new episodes. Thank you so much for crawling with me today. Have a great week. Bye.